As the term shadow work trends on platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, countless gurus and influencers offer pricey courses and mystical retreats promising to help you integrate your shadow. But what does this shadow actually mean, and why, as a matter of fact, is it important to you? Let's strip away the hype and explore what it truly means to embrace your shadow. No crystals or costly retreats required. Welcome to True Sage, and let's dive right in. The term shadow was coined by Carl Jung, one of the greatest and most influential psychologists of the 20th century, and the founder of analytical psychology. He defines the shadow as the unconscious part of the personality which the conscious ego does not identify in itself. In simpler terms, it includes those aspects of oneself that are considered undesirable, unacceptable, or inappropriate according to societal standards or personal aspirations, attributes of which we often are ashamed and deny. These may be emotions, desires, impulses, or weaknesses that are hidden from one's own consciousness because they contradict the preferred self-image or societal norms. But it doesn't include just negative traits. It can also include good qualities such as normal instincts, creative impulses, realistic insights, and appropriate reactions. For example, the shadow of a people pleaser would include assertiveness, independence, and confrontation. Conversely, the shadow of a person who is typically perceived as mean or harsh may contain traits that are more nurturing, compassionate, and kind. These are aspects they might unconsciously suppress or fail to express due to various personal or psychological reasons. Thus, the shadow serves a compensatory function aimed at restoring the wholeness of our personality. From early childhood through to adolescence and even as adults, we absorb both conscious and unconscious cues from our parents, caregivers, and society about what is considered acceptable regarding our bodies, emotions, and behaviors. Anything deemed unacceptable is suppressed and relegated to our shadow, the hidden parts of our psyche. This process involves not only repressing these undesirable aspects, but also internalizing our caregivers' attitudes toward us. When these attitudes are expressed through negative actions such as withholding affection, outright rejection, or even abuse, our relationship with these shadow aspects becomes more conflicted. Despite its repression, the shadow remains highly influential. It exerts a strong influence on behavior, often manifesting in unexpected ways. And because we are not conscious of it, it can cause a lot of chaos in our lives and relationships with others. This can include emotional reactions that seem disproportionate or inappropriate. And as Jung says, emotion, incidentally, is not an activity of the individual but something that happens to him. It can also manifest as projections onto others, where one unconsciously attributes one's own undesirable qualities onto the external world, about which we will talk more later in the video. Unlike the other innate archetypes from the collective unconscious, the shadow is built from our own personal experiences. We already covered Carl Jung's life and key concepts in my previous videos, which I highly recommend, and I'll leave the links in the description. Also, if you can do me a favor and subscribe and hit the thumbs up button, it would really mean a lot to me and would really help this channel. Integrating your shadow is extremely important for an individual's self-development and self-awareness. The process of assimilating the shadow fosters self-acceptance and forgiveness. As individuals begin to understand their deeper selves, they move away from blame and grievance, embracing personal responsibility and discerning what truly belongs to them emotionally and psychologically. This shift allows for a less harsh and more compassionate inner conscience. Consequently, personal values can be more thoughtfully aligned with, or distinguished from, broader societal morals. Integrating the shadow is also an essential step in Carl Jung's process of individuation. According to Jung, the true goal of human existence is to achieve an advanced, enlightened psychological state, unlocking our true self and becoming whole. Identifying and assimilating parts of your shadow requires a lot of introspection and self-criticism. Taking responsibility and being very honest with yourself and accepting that these repressed memories, thoughts, and behaviors are part of you, and that's okay. We need to take seriously the existence of the shadow and become aware of its qualities and intentions. We need to pay conscious attention to moods, impulses, fantasies, and dreams. In dreams, Jung says, the shadow usually appears as a person of the same sex as the dreamer and usually has the attributes we lack in real life. Another way to identify parts of the shadow is to pay attention to overwhelming rage when a friend tells you about a fault or when you don't like someone who you have never met and don't know anything about. But there is something about them you don't like or makes you feel uneasy, but you can't put your finger on what exactly that is. As Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. We must recognize that we are capable of both good and evil. That is the only reality. To deny darkness is to deny half of oneself. Just because you have some undesirable or shameful traits doesn't mean you need to act them out, but you do need to acknowledge and accept them. If not, you will unconsciously act them. And also, as mentioned above, not all the traits of the shadow are evil and undesirable, so we could be missing out on a missing piece of our personality, which could make our personality more wholesome. While some aspects will be easily identified and made conscious, some are more difficult and almost impossible to identify and integrate by yourself, and these aspects come in the form of projections. Psychological projection is when we see our own negative traits in others and in the environment instead of ourselves, thus distorting our perception of reality and hindering genuine self-awareness. Despite clear indications to a neutral observer that these are mere projections, the individual involved often struggles to see this reality. They must first acknowledge the extensive reach of their own shadow before they can retract these emotionally charged projections. Imagine a person who refuses to acknowledge their projections at all. In such cases, the unconscious, not the conscious self, takes over the projecting, allowing these illusions to shape their reality. This leads to a distorted view of the world, transforming it into a mirror of the individual's unrecognized self. Consequently, the individual might experience feelings of incompleteness and emptiness, erroneously attributing these feelings to external malice, thus intensifying their isolation. As projections pile up, the divide between the individual and reality widens, making it increasingly difficult for them to penetrate the illusions crafted by their mind. It's often a tragic sight to witness someone inadvertently ruin their own life and affect others, all the while blind to the fact that the roots of these issues lie within themselves. Unknowingly, they sustain and perpetuate their misery. Although they are consciously focused on blaming a seemingly unjust world that continues to let them down, the true cause of their misery is much closer to home. As Jung said, the individual must be convinced that they are the ones casting a very long shadow before the individual is willing to withdraw his emotionally toned projections from their object. At this stage, I hope you have someone in your life who is very honest with you, and probably the best thing is to get the help of a therapist. As Marie-Louise von Franz, one of Jung's greatest collaborators, said in the book Man and His Symbols, whether the shadow becomes our friend or enemy depends largely upon ourselves. In fact, it is exactly like any other human being with whom one has to get along, sometimes by giving in, sometimes by resisting, sometimes by giving love. Whatever the situation requires, the shadow only becomes hostile when it is ignored or misunderstood. Thank you very much for watching, and subscribe to help this channel and not miss out on the next videos.